Call to order the Village of Riverside Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting for January 25th, 2023. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Pelletier?
Here.
Commissioner Marhol?
Here.
Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Commissioner Hennigan?
Here.
Commissioner Matthews?
Here.
Commissioner Braun?
Here.
Chairperson Mateo?
Here. We have a quorum, and the gang's all here. It's been a while. Is there a motion to approve the Planning and Zoning Commission regular and public hearing minutes of December 28th, 2022?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
I'll give it to you, Melinda. Any edits? Okay. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Pelletier?
Aye.
Commissioner Marhol?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
Abstain.
Commissioner Hennigan?
Aye.
Commissioner Matthews?
Aye.
Commissioner Braun?
Aye.
Chairperson Mateo?
Aye. Motion carries. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak at this point in the meeting? Hearing. At this point. Is there a village board update?
Oh, yes, thank you. On January 5th, the Village Board considered all of the transit-oriented, development-oriented amendments. They supported a few additions to the amendments, which included removing the current limitations on ground floor office uses in the B2 district and replacing existing front, side, and rear yards with a 20-foot setback for buildings adjacent to a residential district or existing single and two-family residential uses in the B1 district. Sorry, that's a mouthful, but I'm happy to clarify if I need to. The Village Board also discussed the site plan review process. They agreed that they were not in favor of having an informal review of site plans that don't involve a PUD, a special use review, or a variation by two commissioners, but there isn't a consensus yet on what, if any, changes the board would like to see for that process. That topic will be on the agenda of the February 2nd meeting. That meeting will also include a final vote on the TOD amendments, including the related sign amendments, and votes on the accessory structure and temporary tent amendment ordinances. The board will consider two variation requests, the tabled Presbyterian Church temporary tent request and the 148 Maplewood Road fence request. And the owners of the 148 Maplewood Road will also separately request a reasonable accommodation for the fence. Thank you.
And Planner Siren's organization of the tables and amendments and tracking all of that has been a thing of beauty. Really well done.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Next up is conceptual review of Central Hauser site plan. If you're following along electronically, it starts on page 12, and Commissioner Marhol is going to recuse himself due to his position on the D96 board.
Very briefly, I'll just speak briefly about the project before introducing the representatives from District 96. District 96 is planning to renovate the Central Hauser site. Construction is planned to begin in the early spring of 2024 and end before the school year begins in that fall. The improvements basically separate vehicular traffic and parking from pedestrian and bicycle traffic and play areas to improve safety on the site. So this is a conceptual review of the site plan. District 96 intends to come back to the PZC to request a full site plan review along with a request for variations related to the site improvements. And I'll let the representatives from District 96 describe the site plan to you.
Gentlemen, last time we had one of these conversations, there was a global pandemic shortly thereafter, so let's not have that this time.
Excuse me. Thank you for having us here this evening. My name is Ryan Kelly. I'm with DLA Architects. We are the architects of record for Riverside School District. I have with me Jason Green from WT Engineering, and we're going to talk a little bit about Central Hauser site plan project. I think you've heard me talk about the separation of parking and play with Riverside District at other schools. It's a goal that they've had for some time and work to accomplish that at different locations, and Central Hauser is one that is in need. So really four major goals with this project. We look to, one, separate parking and play. Two, we want to create better pathways and safer pathways for pedestrians and bicyclists coming into and through the site. Again, that we also want to alleviate congestion on Woodside, where the majority of pickup and drop-off happens for both Central and Hauser. And then finally, we'd like to look at better and more usable recreation spaces for both schools. We'll talk about the existing conditions here for a minute, and maybe Jason could point those out on the site plan here. So currently, we've got to the east side of both Central and Hauser an asphalt parking area. That is where staff parking happens at the most eastern side of it. In between that and the school is where essentially the playground is. So all hardscape play happens there. Just to the north of that, you'll see a sort of grass area. It is not usable a lot of the year. It's got some drainage issues, needs some redevelopment. So that's been a conversation that the district has been having ongoing about what is the best approach to make that more usable. As we talk about pickup and drop off, it happens to the east, really in one lane. You see the two curb cuts along Aiken side. So you have essentially one lane of traffic that comes in and drops off kids and then exits to the south there. So that happens at the rear. The majority of pickup and drop off happens on the western side along Woodside. So Woodside becomes a one-way street during school hours. There's no parking on the right side of the street from 8:30 to, or I'm sorry, 8 to 8:30, and then again from 2:30 to 3:30. So that is in order to allow pickup and drop off to happen along that eastern side of Woodside. What often happens is that stacking happens on each side of the road, and so drop off and pickup, or at least drop off happens on the western side of the road, and so we end up having this pedestrian crossing across the street. So that's something we'll talk about a little bit later, but it is an existing condition that we've been studying. As we talk about the recreation fields, I've already mentioned the grass field. Central has an existing playground at the front of the school. It's about 2,000 square feet. It's very undersized for the size school that it is. The playground equipment is also not appropriate for the age, so it's something that we've talked about redeveloping, and if there's space to do there, or if it's more appropriate toward the rear of the schools. So we'll, again, address that in the proposed plan. As we move forward, our proposed plan looks to, and maybe this is a good time to So our proposed plan looks to, again, separate that parking and play. So what we're looking at here is the existing parking spaces at Central and Hauser are 77 spaces. We'd look to increase that to 86 spaces, including 4 ADA spots. We feel that right now that works well for the school, and it gives a little bit more parking. Required by code parking is 114 spaces. So we are challenged with trying to provide all of these things, more recreation space, safer pedestrian routes, as well as meeting the code for parking. So I'll talk about that in a minute. We've identified 3 pedestrian and bicycle routes that come in from the east side of the site. The largest and widest one at the Central is really we're calling the pedestrian bicycle thoroughfare. So all the kids would come in there. There's a large population of kids that bicycle to school, so that's something that we wanted to accommodate for. Oftentimes, many of you may have seen kids walking through parked cars or through traffic, and it's just not a safe condition. So we're looking to make that better and separate those 2 modes of transport. As you'll see toward the left, we have a recreation field. We would propose to redevelop that. The district's still in conversations about what is the best way to do that in terms of approach and usability and cost. So that's something we'll be talking about later. And then just to the west of that, we have a new developed playground that would be primarily for Central, but would serve both. Through a lot of conversations with the village, with the fire department, and then also with the village arborist, we've identified some key constraints for the site, primarily looking at the playground at the front of Central. It's got some large oak trees, 2 oaks and a maple that we do not want to destroy, and really to enlarge that footprint is not a doable thing. So we moved that playground to the back of the school, and so that gives more space and obviously saves the trees. So what happens with the playground at the front of the school is still in conversation, but it looks like widening that or enlarging that is not going to be feasible. As we talk about I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. As we talk about the playground at the rear, that would be an engineered wood fiber playground, so it does offer some permeability. Jason will talk about those percentages here in a minute. But we will be looking at not only infiltration underneath the recreation field, but also the playground and then permeable pavers as is indicated on the plan. There's a few things that we wanted to bring about as we got into looking at this. So as we look at a few variations that we're going to need to be requesting, one is parking lot landscaping. We're trying to provide as many islands as required. Right now, I think for 86 parking spaces, we are required 18 islands. We're coming a little bit short of that. We have 16 interior landscape islands. We're trying to balance that with some additional perimeter green space that we're providing. We have found that on the south, we're very challenged at that property line with that residence. If you see on the north side of the parking lot, or I'm sorry, north side of the recreation field, you've got a fence that is actually on the district's property. The property line is about 1 to 4 feet beyond that. We would probably look to keep that in place. I think that's a perceived boundary line. It's also a screening that is probably enjoyed by both the district as well as the neighbor. So that gives us a bit of a challenge and a hardship as we look to provide more green space at the parking lot. So right now we're looking at a requirement of roughly 2,500 square feet of green space, and we're at about 1,900 square feet. So that's a variance that we'll be requesting and talking more about. Let's see here. Do we want to talk about permeability?
New proposed. I think you've got it up there now. Jason Green, for the record, Jason Green, WT Group. Thanks for having us again. In general, this exhibit tries to demonstrate the overall surfaces that will be proposed on the ground surface. So red in general is impervious area. Blue are permeable surfaces, permeable pavers, wood chip playground, and permeable concrete for the Foursquare and basketball area. And green represents grass. So the only difference is the crosshatch green would be grass, and then the athletic field we've used a different color, a little different hatch. It's look at the plus signs, green's plus signs. Fire access will be made, for the most part of the site, it's very open to fire access around the perimeter of the building. The one area that's a little challenging is the north wing. So we've provided for 2 means of access for fire trucks in that area. So one is from you wait to see which one I choose, is from Woodside. So everybody knows there's an existing drive there. Now we want to deter people from driving through that entrance. So what we're proposing there is collapsible bollards. So we're narrowing down the driveway to 18 feet, which is what the fire department needs. But we've put collapsible bollards in that spot to deter people from driving down there anymore. I think people maybe have developed that habit, and so we want to make sure that it's a safe condition. So that 18-foot drive brings us back to the east corner of the building. So it provides access for that the northmost face of the building there. And then the other means of access that we've provided for the fire department is from the parking lot, very near the handicap parking, through to the east face of the north wing. So Ryan will, oh, you already did. And again, here we're also going to minimize the width to the 18 feet, which is the width required for a fire truck, but we're also proposing bollards so that a car can't accidentally go the wrong way into a play area. And let's see, next sheet. Go to drainage next. In the current condition, somewhere between 15 and 20% of the existing east parking lot sheet drains into Akenside Road. In addition, roughly 3/4 or 75% of the grass field area sheet drains into Akenside Road. Obviously, sheet drainage means the water's on the surface of the ground, so it's into the street, and then it takes some time to get into manholes and get into the storm sewer system. So that's not ideal. And the remainder of the parking lot and really the majority of the building and the site drain through existing storm sewer network, and that drains into the storm sewers that are in Akenside Road. We spent significant time televising every pipe in that system, and it's quite antiquated. There's a lot of cracked pipes and joints that are coming apart, and those openings are allowing groundwater to enter the pipes, as well as silt and sediment to enter. And whatever enters that pipe is going into the public sewer system, and since it's a combined sewer, it has to get treated, and then everything eventually ends up in the receiving waterways. So what we're proposing is to replace all the storm sewer systems with new pipes that are watertight joints, and to add more drainage so that we're capturing all the on-site water and diverting it into a storm sewer system so that we're not allowing that overland sheet drainage to the street. And then we're proposing to take that water into a water treatment unit, which will be an underground vault filled with gravel. And as the water flows through the gravel, it gets cleansed because it gets scrubbed by the action of flowing between the individual rock pieces.
So
And
Mr.
then-
Kelly just pointed two different places,
Oh.
so there are going to be two different,
In the parking lot as well as under the recreation field.
thanks.
Thanks. And also provide a underground vault, which would provide for, so the water quality unit is the gravel that it kind of lets the water, it scrubs the water as it flows through. That also promotes infiltration of water back into the ground. And then also we'll have a vault which will store the water so that we can slowly release it at a rate that's significantly less than what the existing runoff rate is. So that control means that we can minimize the flood risk to the neighborhood. In fact, improve the condition. The amount is roughly 80 to 90% reduction in the peak runoff rate from the existing condition to the proposed. So significant improvement. And then getting back to the permeable surfaces real quick. It might be a little bit tough to see the differences in the surfaces, but we do have permeable concrete for the basketball area, very similar to Ames, what we did at Ames. We have permeable wood chip or engineered wood fiber playground. And then we have permeable pavers. And those are in two locations. One's in the parking lot, and then the other one is in the walkways around the playground, including that access drive for the fire access over to Woodside. So the acreages of these three are for wood chips, 0.14 acres. Permeable pavers, including the walks and in the parking lot, are a total of 0.42 acres. And the concrete basketball area is 0.1 acre. So the total of that is 0.66 acres. Considering the development, the disturbed area for the project is 3 acres, we think 0.66 is a fair amount for that amount of development. Let me see that. One more thing I just want to point out is that we do propose a little safety measure on Woodside. And it is called a curb extension, and it involves bringing the curbs of the street in towards the middle of the road at the crosswalk. And the intent is, it was highly recommended by the traffic engineer. So the intent is that it shortens the distance that pedestrians are in the roadway. It also minimizes the amount of cars or the amount of cars that parked right where the pedestrians are darting out between cars, because they can't be parked right in those areas. So it frees up that space so that the pedestrian can be seen from a shorter distance. That's me. You want to go back? Yeah.
I did want to mention, thank you, that crosswalk extension, we looked at that. As Jason already said, it does shorten the distance that the pedestrian has to cross to get across Woodside. Woodside, I think, is about a 37-foot wide street. We're proposing a reduced flared curb extension of 7 feet. So it still reduces it to the amount of a usable two-way street. And again, it makes pedestrians more visible as vehicles approach. So that's a measure that we feel is important at the entrance of Hauser. There is a crosswalk at the entrance of Central, so this would mimic that, but without the stoplight. No stoplight is proposed. The other thing that I did want to mention was the fire access that Jason touched on. We did meet with Chief Buckley, and we did talk about our proposed access around the site, also closing off that access drive to the north of Hauser. That's often a cut through. When Woodside is one way, it's hard to tell when it is and when it isn't, so left turns are not allowed there during school hours. Oftentimes that happens, so it's pretty hazardous. So we're proposing to close that down, make that a pedestrian thoroughfare, but still provide access for fire trucks and when necessary. So Chief Buckley was good with our approaches, both there at the access drive, as well as to the backside of Hauser. And then obviously access to Central is pretty straightforward with the alleyway back there. The primary fire connection is at the front side on Woodside of both schools, so that would be their primary location to set up. I think that's most of it. There's a lot of moving parts here. Really 3 variations that I think that we'll be excuse me, looking for. I talked about one, parking lot landscaping requirements. We're trying to meet the intent of that ordinance with added landscaping around and green space. The second would be the parking requirement, off-street parking requirement. We're at a sort of a balancing act of trying to provide as much and more parking than exists now, while trying to meet some of those other ordinances. The other variation that we would be requesting would be fencing in the street yard. By nature of what now exists as a through lot condition on Aiken side, it puts everything on the east side of those schools and essentially what I think would be considered the street yard. So as we look to fence around the recreation field, we would want to do a 6-foot PVC coated chain link fence for safety, both from, for vehicles and neighbors. And then we would propose a 4-foot wrought iron style fence at the pedestrian walkways and then also around the playground. So those would technically, I think, be viewed by the village as in the street yard. So we'd be offering and asking for a variation for those as well. I'm happy to answer any questions. I think there's, like I said, there's a lot of things to this that we're trying to address in one project, and they're all sort of a little bit intertwined. So.
I'm sure we have lots of questions, and we'll probably be jumping back and forth between you and different aspects of
Absolutely.
it, but that's, probably the easiest way for us to get through our lists.
Sure.
So, Commissioner Miller?
Yes, well, just picking up on the fence issue, so there'd be 6-foot fence around the entire field. And then can you just point out where the other 4-foot fences would be?
Around the wood chip playground, right?
Yep. And then
And then also along the
pedestrian walkway,
pedestrian walk.
separating the vehicular traffic from that pedestrian walkway.
And that walkway is 12 feet wide?
Yes.
Okay. And any other fences?
There's the backstop at the baseball.
Correct.
Which is 20
Okay.
feet tall.
Yep.
And I think
And that's it. The other fences are existing. Existing to remain.
Okay. So can you explain the rationale for having the 4-foot fences along the parking lot? Well, I'll assume there'll be bumper curbs there like any other parking lot. And then also the 4-foot fence around the playground area?
I mean, the 4-foot fence around the playground is pretty standard practice. It's a safety measure. We've got elementary school kids, as young as preschool and first grade. So that's a pretty standard supervision rule that we like to use, and the district used at other playgrounds. Along the walkway, I mean, I think that it's important to separate that vehicular traffic from the pedestrian traffic. We're trying to define spaces, but they always seem to overlap when they're right next to each other. So we think that to avoid any accidents, it's a good safety measure. What we would provide, you had a question, but
Oh, I was just going to say, but now for the central walkway that goes right through the parking lot, you're not proposing fences to fence in people there?
no, if I understand where you're
But you're assuming that students are going to use that as well, I assume? They'll be allowed to use that?
we're calling this the central.
Okay, yeah, the one that goes through the middle of the parking lot.
Middle of the parking lot.
Yeah.
No, we're not proposing that to be fenced. I mean, the intent there is that would be staff, adults. We're providing a sidewalk, but maybe folks that are paying a little bit better attention than kids going to school.
So from a parent and someone who's lived not that far from that school for like 15 years, I suggest that kids would use that walkway that goes right through the parking lot. If for no other reason, then there's a crosswalk right across Aiken side right there. So all the kids coming from that section of the village and they're walking or pushing their bikes, they're not going to come across that crosswalk, then take a right and go to the 12-foot wide walkway. So I'm just saying.
I agree with you, and it happens today. So what we tried to do is flank either side, north and south, and then provide one central. What the district does now, and I think they would continue to need to do, is to have someone staffed out there to direct kids that you can't walk through the parking lot.
So I'm just suggesting that's not
sure
going to
you-
happen. And so my larger point, though, about the fence and having that 4-foot fence is, I would not be in favor of having that additional 4-foot fence in that street yard. I think it doesn't, I don't think it's, my personal opinion is it wouldn't be required for safety. Once teachers park their cars there, there's not a lot of in and out traffic there. And then students are not going to have a danger of cars overshooting their concrete bumper curbs or whatever those things are called and running into the walkway. And then as far as the playground fence, I would suggest, unless you have more explanation as to why that's needed, in the middle of an existing playground with a 6-foot fence around an area and a building on the other side and a large expanse on the other side and far away from any cars. So maybe the district or you could think through that.
Well,
a
I
little
think
bit
that,
more.
the intent is to separate that from Aiken side, for sure. I mean, because we're constrained with
Well,
space.
I'm talking about the playground, the wood chip playground area.
Oh, I gotcha.
Yeah, why that fence is necessary.
Supervision and safety. I mean, that's typically what we'll do around a playground. I mean, I think the teachers like it. It makes their job easier when they're taking classes out there. I mean, it's a good safety and supervision measure.
I don't know if there's anyone from the D96 board other than Mr. Marhoul who will hear this, but I can tell you, again, as a parent of D96, the perception, I think, of the students is that there is very little fun at recess, and there's way too much supervision, and I think this is only going to, rather than enhance the play space, it will make it far more controlled. If the idea is that you'll bring a class, their recess will be in the fenced-in playground area, you know, since we have a role of approving this fence in this street yard, I would just, I think there's reasons beyond zoning for not having that fence.
Sure.
That's all I'll say about that.
Ryan, could I ask, were you planning to put a fence in the existing playground as well? I don't know if you mentioned that
No,
during the.
no, we were
Okay.
not.
Thank you.
I know we talked about that, but there was, no, we're not
Okay, thank you.
proposing that.
Although, to Commissioner Miller's point, once the teachers are parked, parents or caretakers will be coming into and toward the school from Aiken side to drop off their children, right?
Yeah, that's something I didn't really highlight enough, but it is considered pickup and drop off, be primarily for Central Elementary. You know, the thought is to alleviate any congestion or the congestion that happens on Woodside. So the intent is that staff would come park early, and then it could be used as pickup and drop off. And there's enough space to bring cars off of Aiken side, so there's queuing space, so those cars don't back up onto Aiken side, which currently happens sometimes now.
Other questions, comments?
I just have a point of clarification. I'm looking at what was provided to us online, and it appears that the playground and the basketball court are flip-flopped. Was that changed, or am I just reading your map wrong? The playground is still near Central, and the Foursquare and basketball court is still on the north side near the, can you point out the playground for me? Okay,
That's the new one.
that's the new one. Okay, maybe
Proposed
I'm
new
looking
one.
at the old one. Okay.
We've looked at several iterations of this, and through conversations with the village, the arborist, that playground has moved quite a bit, so I apologize if that's not the most current, but as I mentioned, there are reasons why it didn't work at the front of the school, and so this is the most recent design.
It was here at one time.
Okay.
Now it's there.
All right.
Other questions?
I have a few questions.
Great.
With regard to the fencing, there's, is there a fence along Aiken side, right along the sidewalk?
No, there's not.
So the fields are not completely enclosed by fence?
There's a large hedge, but no, that is not
Existing.
existing.
There's
Yeah.
an existing,
We do have a fence proposed, though.
you do have a fence proposed where you're pointing? which
Yes,
is
I'm
right
sorry. I
behind
thought
the
you said
sidewalk.
existing
On the side
condition.
of the field.
We are proposing a fence, yes.
And that was the 6-foot chain link?
Mhm.
And it's like a foot behind the sidewalk, is it?
Roughly. Close.
Okay. And you're moving the sidewalk though, right? It looked like you were proposing a new sidewalk that moves it further, a little bit further away from the street.
Not really.
No?
I think,
Okay.
maybe that was maybe we had something
Okay.
in there that made it look that way.
Mhm.
But really, the only sidewalk that we're proposing to change along Aiken side would be right where the driveways are,
Okay.
just the sidewalks we're
Mhm.
adjacent to it.
Okay. I definitely would not be in favor of a 6-foot fence along the sidewalk there, certainly not chain link fence. Maybe something ornamental, like a metal ornamental fence and something shorter. But even that, we try to create a vista down the street and keep it off of the sidewalk. To be that close to the sidewalk is a little enclosing. One thing I'd like to see with the next submission is, I know we've already asked for existing impervious and proposed impervious and what the difference is. But, you know, with all of the permeable pavements and surfaces that we're starting to see come in as kind of a replacement for landscape, I think I'd like to see also a comparison between existing green space versus proposed green space. And by green space, I would say that's planted area, not like the wood chips necessarily. Definitely not permeable pavers, yeah, it's a way to distinguish between the permeable that is paved and the permeable that is not, where that is something growing, let's say. I'm a little concerned about the additional crosswalk. Just because there is already a mid-block crosswalk with a pedestrian signal, which is good and functional, but to add another one, yeah, the existing one, but we're adding another one in a fairly short space there. And I think it'll be safe during school hours, but it will not be as safe in the off hours when people aren't expecting all of the pedestrians and the children. You know, I think there's a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit through there during the day. So I think people are super careful, but you're introducing another place where people are allowed to cross and cars are required to stop, but that doesn't mean that they will because they might not see them. So I just think the increased safety with that crosswalk is questionable. Is all. I love the idea of the extensions, and maybe that could be done at the PED signal and try and get everyone to cross there. That's basically where they cross now.
Has that been
That was
discussed?
the reason for the flares. It was that it is a mid-block. I mean, we did attach the traffic study. So, I mean, she looked closely at that, and you know, the distances, you know, per her recommendations do work. But it is a concern that we addressed, you know, by that flare. So it definitely understood.
Right, yeah, so again, I love the idea of a flare, just
Yeah.
I don't think another crosswalk introduced in that short space, especially without a traffic signal or without, you know, a PED signal, is not necessarily going to improve the safety. And the students seem to cross at that signal. So it doesn't seem to be a problem.
Commissioner Pelletier, could I add a few comments to that? So I personally, do not see the addition of that crosswalk as at all necessary, and not being a traffic engineer, but someone who's lived there, and my kids have gone there. I walk by there frequently when school drop off and pick up. I did that the other day to observe what the conditions are right now. I think to my opinion, I think it should be carefully reassessed whether adding that crosswalk would be a positive thing or a negative thing, and there's a lot of reasons. The only time that I noticed, and that they mentioned in here, that people cross that street is only during pickup, only in the afternoon, outside of Hauser. It is literally like 5 to 10 minute long period. And again, if you put the crosswalk there, that encourages people to cross. There is an existing crosswalk, 100, 200 feet over by Central. There is another crosswalk at the intersection near Mr. Sachi's house. To add a third crosswalk there, I think would add confusion. And I think the traffic engineer maybe could look into whether that's going to actually make congestion there far worse, because now you're going to have cars stopping. During drop-off, it's very smooth, and someone should talk to the police officers out there and get their impression of whether an additional crosswalk would be helpful. Because parents pull up along the side of the road, they drop off the kids, and they move. And when there's a police officer there, they tell me that it works much better because they get people to pull way up, and then they move. The problem at pickup is that people have parked there. There's some cars that are always parked there, like the Hauser principal's car and others. There are additional cars that have parked there. And then they're waiting for their students. And then if their students don't come out, they don't leave right away. So there's a lot of issue. But once people leave, then you can pull right out, and then other people or other cars are coming in. If there's another crosswalk there, plus there's the light at the end of Woodside, where Woodside and Park intersect, and Kimbart, I just see there's a potential for a lot of backing up. I just think it's a not a good reason. And I would point out that in your letter to us, you said that the very reason to enhance the Akenside side pickup and drop-off where they're coming through is to help alleviate the congestion.
It is.
In Woodside.
Yeah,
On
no,
Woods-
but
on-
I don't think it's the solution, so we're trying to look at it from, multiple points of view.
I really don't think, I mean, as traffic engineer should look at this a little bit more. I don't think it's much of a
Sure.
good
I think what
solution.
was
And I
the-
also think doing the bi-directional would be a big mistake. That would make it even more confusing and more backups. I think that would just be, yeah, a bad idea.
Sure.
And one last thing I would say that I think it was noted in the SAM traffic engineers thing is that staff jaywalk at that point. I think maybe the school should do a little bit more to instruct their staff not to jaywalk. And maybe they could have a staff member out there instructing students not to jaywalk and instructing, I know this is a problem that's been going on for years and years and years. But maybe that would be, rather than an engineered solution that could not be a solution, maybe better to have a little interfacing with the staff.
Sure.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mateo, can
Please.
I just wanted to add to what Commissioner Pelletier and Commissioner Miller said about the fences. With respect to the rear fence on, is that Akenside or? Yeah. I mean, that I don't really understand that for a lot of reasons. I went to Hauser and Central, and there's never been a fence back there. It's been thick underbrush. And it's always I'm not saying we need to be married to tradition, but I'm not certain what a chain link fence adds to that beyond looking at a chain link fence, particularly in the winter. Or when they're just aesthetically not pleasing, and I don't think it adds any real safety to what's going on back there. Then with respect to the Commissioner Miller's point about the other fence along the parking area, can you confirm now, will that sidewalk, there's a sidewalk there, is that correct?
Correct,
And it's
yeah.
a different color than the parking area, right? I mean, a different material? So people would be able, even at a fairly young age, to discern the fact that this is the sidewalk, this is the street, I stay out of the street, I walk on the sidewalk. I mean, I'm reluctant to have a scenario where you're just whacking up fences left and right in a school. It's school's bad enough. You're there. When you're a little kid, you're there from 8 to 3, man. When you go out for recess and you got fences all over the place, what Commissioner Miller said, I think makes a lot of sense, that you wanted a little more, within the boundaries of safety, I mean, I understand the playground, that, to me makes more sense, but really the wrought iron sidewalk fence and the rear fence, I'd be reluctant to see that.
Commissioner Hennigan?
Thank you. I also would not like to see a 6-foot chain link fence along Akenside. I'm not opposed to the idea of a fence in general, but I would prefer something shorter, 4 foot, something more decorative. I think that would be more appropriate there. Overall, I really like the separation of uses that you've achieved with this plan. I think it'll flow much better and be a safer environment. For that reason, I actually like the fence along the sidewalk, separating it from the parking lot. I know how kids walk around, the slower walkers, and to discourage kids from walking into a traffic lane, I think that would be a positive thing. I'm not sure about the proposed crosswalk on Woodside. I don't have enough experience with this site to know if it would be a good idea or a bad idea, but wherever the kids are crossing the street, I love the idea of the curb extensions. I think that would be a significant improvement.
So I have just a couple more things.
That's why we're here.
Okay. So the permeable pavers all have some kind of void below them, right? Few feet of aggregate for storage. The wood chip area does not, is that, or does it?
It does. It's not
Okay.
as much. It has 4 inches of stone
stone,
instead
that's-
of 18 inches.
Right, and it's
18 to
not
24.
large stone, it's aggregate base, it's not for storage.
It's like, it has some storage. It's 3/4 inch clear, so it's
Okay.
actually got a pretty good, it's 36% open space, which is about as much as you can get. So it's got some, but again, it's only
It's
4
4
inches.
inches.
It's only 4 inches thick.
And it's like 3 feet under the,
It's like a foot down. You got a 1 foot of wood chips.
I
and
mean,
then-
for the permeable pavers, what's the
Oh,
stored?
yeah, that's more like 3 to 4 feet, yeah.
Okay. So you talked about, where it was talked about, Woodside going 2 ways, like not doing the one-way thing during school hours. Is that been dismissed? Or is that a village?
Well, it was something that it was investigated in the traffic study.
Yeah.
It's not something we're proposing with this site in this plan at this time.
Okay. Okay. And then the fields, what is the surface of the playing field? Is that determined?
It has not been determined. We've had many discussions in the district and the community about what's going to be the most usable, what's affordable for the district, and what's appropriate for Riverside. So that's an ongoing discussion that we will have to get back to you on.
Okay, thank you.
I had a few questions. Go. Okay. There's just a few, I mean, I have to say, I think your plan is very nice. I like it overall. I think it looks really great. There were just a few things that I had questions about or recommendations.
That's why we're here.
Can you explain to me just a little bit, just for clarity, that fire lane that comes at a diagonal behind, where would the fire truck come from before that?
Right here, this one,
Yeah, where do they access that?
through this drive.
Okay.
this entrance drive. They would drive down to the end of the parking, and then this is where the.
So we depress that curb.
You'd have some bollards or something? Okay.
We'd have, yep.
Bollards there, and this would be flush, so that the truck could just drive onto that, and we would size this 4 square area so that it could
Okay.
handle a fire truck,
Okay.
and then you could drive down to there.
I see where it says depressed curb, yeah. So is the idea that once it comes towards the school, and I believe that there's an entry to the school right there, that it stops between the planters? Okay.
Correct.
And they don't need any more access or anything? They don't, the fire people?
No, I mean, NFPA says they need to get within 150 feet of the building at all sides. It's up to the fire department to decide how many lanes of access that they need. They're the authority with jurisdiction. So again, we reviewed this with Chief Buckley. As I mentioned, the primary Siamese connection, water connection is at the front of the school on Woodside. So that would be their primary point of entry. But
Okay.
obviously that gives them access all the way around the building.
Okay, I was just curious about that.
Sure.
And the planters, what kind of, do you have a conception of what kind of planters these are going to be, how tall they are, and what's their purpose?
The purpose is a combination of congregation, green space, and sort of outdoor learning space. So we're thinking, they're not 100% designed, but, we're thinking of a low planting wall, some natural stone, giving, kids somewhere to congregate, somewhere to be, behind the school before they enter the school in a sort of safe place. And then also, if a class wanted to come out there and spend some time outside, there's opportunity for that as well.
Okay, so they would be child-friendly, student-friendly?
Yes.
It would potentially be for use of the Central as well as Hauser students? Or?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we're, in terms of height, 18 inches to 24 inches, somewhere in that vicinity.
Okay. I'm not sure what's better for children or outdoor learning or just green space, rather having a flat surface or these planters and maintenance and all the rest. I don't know, but I can tell you my daughter said that kids aren't going to like planters. And she's in high school now. She went through Central and Hauser, but that was her impression. Now, the pavers that are all through this area, the heavy-duty pavers so that the trucks can drive on them, could one of you talk a little bit about the different characteristics or appeal of different types of permeable surfaces? Like, for instance, why not have this area be the permeable concrete that you have somewhere else? Why make them pavers? What was the rationale for that? And what will this space be used just for people walking or kids playing too, and what's better?
Probably be a combination of both. The intent of it is, obviously the pavers are a little bit more decorative. We wanted to create those clear pedestrian paths where there are none today, so that's part of it. Beyond that, the reason for, I think you can speak to the infiltration rates, but I think permeable pavers have a higher infiltration rate than a permeable concrete. So that's something that we thought was more appropriate. Obviously, pavers don't work very well for a basketball court or four square, so that's why the difference in material there.
So they're more permeable than the concrete or asphalt? That's interesting.
Certainly asphalt. Yeah.
Yeah, but like Ryan said, pavers don't give a good ball bounce. So if you're playing basketball on a paver, you might
Yeah.
hit the corner and it'll go weird. So the permeable concrete provides a better surface for that ball.
That's why I was thinking about this area, because I can conceive that there's a lack of space. There always has been in this area. The kids would be playing here, and I don't know if they'd be playing just by sitting around or, I don't know, whatever, or bouncing a ball, or I don't know. And if those pavers, having all those pavers would be most beneficial for the kids playing. But I take your point about providing a pathway.
Well, and one thing I didn't talk about there is the pedestrian pathway that we need to provide. There's also an entrance that I'll point out to Hauser, just adjacent. There's also the cafeteria delivery happens along there, so there's multiple points of pedestrian and loading that needs to happen at that point. So.
I was going to ask about the delivery trucks, not just the fire trucks. Where would they be going to?
Yeah, so delivery for the schools would happen along that drop-off lane. Obviously, they would happen not at drop-off time, but that is the maintenance garage, so they'd receive them there. And as I mentioned, just adjacent to those planters is the ramp into the kitchen, so that's where they receive their deliveries. So that truck would also park in that drop-off lane and then, walk down to that ramp.
Okay, right. And I also had a question about, or a recommendation or idea. The walkway that runs the length on the south side, I question the necessity of that. And I wasn't clear, I know you touched on it, it wasn't clear why that isn't just green space. Because again, from my experience being there, I have a feeling there'd be very few staff or students or anyone using that as a walkway. Staff would only do it if they're one of those people who parked one of those 13 cars. Students, I don't conceive where the students would come from that would use that
Sure.
pathway as opposed to one of the others.
So there's I'll go back to the microphone. Right here, there's an entrance to Central Elementary School. So that would be their primary access to the playground, now that it is at the rear. The other thing that we learned in meeting with both Central and Hauser is that they felt like Central would utilize pickup and drop off in the rear on Aiken's side more than Hauser would. So we wanted to provide that clear pedestrian path, a safe pedestrian path and crosswalk into Central.
But I'm discussing the one that goes from your crosshatched crosswalky area there? Right. East, all the way east along the property line. Yes, that area. Well, it seems to me it would be more appropriate,
So
okay, to have that as a green space and not a walkway.
agreed. We talked about that. We thought about that. One thing that we wanted to do, and I'll just give you my rationale, because I know we aren't providing green space there, is that we wanted to, back to your comment, kids will kind of take whatever path they're closest to. We wanted to provide multiple paths into the site, one north, one south, and then one central. So that was our rationale there. But again, trying to balance all of these things. It was.
Well, I would suggest rethink, I mean, just because you could get more green space there. And I just don't conceive of, if you think where those kids would be coming from, they would be maybe crossing at the crosswalk over Aikenside. They're not going to be walking over to the one there. I mean, they're just not, and if it doesn't exist, if there's green space there, they're not going to need it. They're going to go through the middle of the parking lot. And there's no population of kids I can think of that would be coming from the south and coming like down that area and just to that walkway and coming down. I don't see where they'd be coming from.
Sure.
So just, I would reconsider that. And I wanted, yeah.
Sorry, so you were talking about the north, east-west one coming, that one there? Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
yes, just that up to where that cross-hatched area is roughly.
Okay.
And, oh, and could you also discuss the internal drive lanes for the parking lot, how wide their width? Because there was some discussion of the north-south versus the east-west. Yeah, the directions and their widths.
Yep, so those are one-way coming into the parking lot at 18 feet wide, where you have 90-degree parking back-to-back. Those are 20 feet, or 24 feet wide drive lanes
Okay.
in the internal part of the parking lot, and then 18 continuing around, exiting the parking lot.
And so that would be a one direction, a single directional one,
Correct.
the circulating one?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And you set those widths because that's what our code requires?
I did. Yeah.
All right. Okay, and I already made my comment that I would be in favor, I would look more favorably on having the main pedestrian walkway be a little narrower than 12 feet, because again, conceiving of how it's used, 12 feet seems very wide to me for that kind of a sidewalk, with no other, there's going to be nothing obstructing it. There'll be no planters, there'll be no dogs, there'll be no fire hydrants, it's going to be a straight shot. So 12 feet seems a little wide to me, and then again, you could get a little more green space, a little more.
Sure, I know
permeable space.
we played with that as well. Our thought there was, and maybe it comes in the form of striping, but to provide a wide enough space to allow bikes to be walked
Sure.
down that path as
Right,
well.
right, and maybe, but just thinking about it, the bikes will be going one way. So it's not like you're going to have like a city sidewalk. I mean, when kids are coming in, they'll be walking or having bikes going one way, and when they're leaving, they'll be going the other way. So I just don't know that 12 feet is necessary. But, and then, was there anything else I had? Oh, and I just wanted to say about the number of parking spaces. If, with our new Todd proposal for new zoning parking spaces, my calculation was that all our code would require of the district is 91 parking spaces. So at 86, I think you're obviously quite close to that.
Could I ask how
You
that
can get a
number comes-
20% reduction if you're something like a school in a transit-oriented location, which this school
Would it-
is because it's close to the train station.
I'm sorry, what was the percentage reduction?
20% reduction. So
Okay.
from 114, 20% of that, you can get down to 91. That's how I calculate it, if our village board approves.
Is that an ordinance that's,
They're considering it right now.
okay, okay.
It's under consideration, yeah.
But they would still need a variation.
Yes, you'd still need a variation for down to the 86, which is, it's,
Okay.
and I would actually be in favor of even a little less parking if that were possible, and a little more, maybe larger islands or other ideas, but I know that's my opinion.
More questions, comments? I'm going to go through my questions. Well, actually, go ahead, because I have a lot of questions. Please go to the podium, Mr. Sashi. Can you go to the podium, please? You should remember that.
So I'm Lonnie Sachi, 111 Woodside Road. So I'm a bit concerned about, there's an existing fence between my driveway, existing chain link fence, that actually needs replacing. Sections of it have been replaced. You're doing a black PVC coated steel fence in other areas of your plan, but I didn't see when I was looking at the schematics anything being done. Is that fence going to remain as is, or are you going to replace that with a black one to coordinate? Exactly.
I'll show you the board. It's in this location here.
And it's 10 or 12 feet high at the back of my driveway, tapering down right about where the actual school ends and my building ends is pretty much even, and then it dips down to, I believe, 6 or 8 feet, I think it's 6 feet. But that's just exposed steel chain link fence,
Not coated, just.
not coated. So you're gonna be doing, or you're proposing black all over, but that one would remain exposed steel. I've talked to them before. I've talked to Jim Fitton about that fence needs periodic work, which I usually call their attention to when it needs it. Because the bottom of it is, the cross-selects of the chain are sharp. In a lot of cases, they're protruding into my driveway, and they have to have someone come and fix that all the time. So while you're doing all that other fence work, if it gets done, perhaps that should be part of it.
Would that be considered a side yard at that point? Probably not, right?
Well,
From
to me, it's a side yard.
Yeah.
Right? To them, it's it's a entry point.
Just trying to find out if there would be a challenge to having that tall of a fence proposed.
Well,
Yeah, we do. It's,
from the village
it
standpoint.
already dips down for the majority. Like I said, where the school property, not property, but building ends, and about even with where the back of my building ends, it dips down considerably. And I'm okay with the height, it doesn't bother me at all. Doesn't bother any of us. It lives there. So, that's just a step point. Really.
Sure.
The configuration of it is fine as is, I think, but that's up to you all to decide. So, okay. And I might also add that I like most of the plan, but,
Can you go back to the podium, please?
yeah. On the school side of that existing chain link fence, there is no greenery at all. It's just pavement. My blacktop ends at the fence, and so does the school's. But I know on some of the conceptualized drawings I've seen there are provisions for some green space. I would just want to make sure that whatever you propose there doesn't isn't the type of things that are going to be growing through the fence into, protruding into my driveway, because we don't want our cars all scratched up with branches. But, so something like a 2 or 3 foot hedge along there, if you're going to do green space alongside, would be preferable. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sachi. Okay, so the proposed woodside bump out curb extension, you said it's 7 feet each
Correct.
side or total?
each side.
Okay, and then the email we got today concerning the fire lane coming in from Woodside, from this email, are we to understand that the permeable pavers are not going to be able to support a stationary fire truck? What should we take from this? Will there be any changes to the plan that we got based on this
No,
email?
the permeable pavers would support it. I think the discussion was about those greenery pavers. Those would not support it. And then we've not had good experience having that grass grow and stay alive. So that is not an option we're exploring.
Okay. So no trees are going to be removed, is that correct?
Correct.
But some might be added?
We are adding trees in the landscape islands, also along the recreation field
Right.
to the north.
So might we be getting a plant list? Would that be appropriate thing to ask for when it finally comes back?
Absolutely.
Okay. Several of us have asked for the impervious calculations, existing and proposed. My understanding is Planner Siren has that, but if you can include it in the final packet as well.
Sure.
You're well underneath it, or you're underneath it,
Yes.
right? Currently, and,
We're improving this existing condition
right.
quite a bit.
Okay. So the traffic engineer had proposed a raised speed bump crosswalk through the parking lot. It looks like you're not doing it, is that correct?
We are not. No.
Okay.
I mean, I think we've had multiple discussions. I know that Woodside has been discussed at length. So we're looking to improve the situation, but in small measure.
Okay. So from Akenside, there are 3 proposed pedestrian walkways.
Correct?
The one on the north side is still, it's there, right?
Yes.
And that'll only have the northmost fence, right? You're not going to have a double wall of fence for that
No.
part? Okay,
Only the fence on the north side of that.
right. Dumpster, I found that on the map. So if the fire truck comes in from Woodside, it can only get as far as the planters, if the planters exist. It can't keep continuing through.
Correct.
Okay, and Director Buckley's okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Kelly, in the beginning, you talked about, because there aren't going to be the required number of parkway landscaping islands, that there was going to be additional perimeter landscaping. Can you point out where that is?
Sure. Just looked at along here, where it does not exist today. We provide some additional perimeter
But not in the, so you're talking about perimeter of the whole
On
place,
the
not the
site.
parking lot?
Yeah, no, not directly around the parking lot.
Okay. Where's bike parking going to be?
Also along this north side.
Well, so just assure us that you've already figured out the racks and where they're going to be placed and when a fire truck does have to come down through there, so
Yeah.
that's all worked out?
Yeah.
Okay. Planner Siren, in your experience, is it a thing to merge parking lot islands so that you have the same square footage, but fewer of them, and then you can possibly plant something that's going to survive in it?
It's advisable if you want to plant a shade tree. I think that makes some sense, so that you don't have narrow medians.
Is that something that you and the board have discussed?
We have discussed. I mean, I didn't think we've discussed it here. Those small islands make it very hard for a shade tree to survive. We do them and we replace them, and it's a challenge. So it's something we're always battling.
So you discussed it with the D96 board and, or no?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, not with the school board in terms of combining perimeter islands into a larger island? Or, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
what's the question?
For example?
We have not discussed that strategy. I mean, we're really, in this initial concept, looking at how do we comply with all of the ordinances and which we don't, and kind of get some feedback.
Would that change? I mean, they still need a variation because they don't have as many, but is that something they could consider?
Certainly,
So it would be based on square footage rather than numbers?
sure.
Is that, do any commissioners
I
are
think that
interested
would
in
be
that?
an excellent idea, if you could have a large enough island to have a significant shade tree, maybe in the middle of the parking lot or on the edges. I think that would be very nice.
In the parking lot, and your car would go under the shade tree?
Well, maybe like on the corners, near the walkway, or somewhere like that area. Shade tree, but those spots will be fought for, you're right, yeah.
No, they won't be fought for, because birds and shade trees. And if you've ever parked your car under a shade tree, because I've done it over, I have many
Okay.
times to count.
I I always look for the shade when I'm in the
Oh.
parking lot, but
Well, but
I protect my car's paint.
for an island shade tree, what kind of tree are we talking about? Is it going to be very large and have much of a canopy? Any idea? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I just don't see a big, wide tree being there.
Sure, it depends on the species of the tree that you select. I think generally, in my experience, narrower, I mean, everyone's seen this when they've gone to a parking lot where they have a narrow median, it's generally neglected. Wider medians allow for more plantings that generally, doesn't get rutted and, folks drive over it, that kind of thing. Generally, wider is better for a median.
it's probably better for insect life also and all the rest if you have a little bit more of a thriving habitat there than tiny little strip, as you say.
Depending on the flexibility of the design and the number of parking spaces that the district desires to keep, it may be an idea to focus the landscaping towards that central walking path, if it's possible. Now, obviously, having a sidewalk with 2 planters on either side makes an even wider area, which could mean that the landscaping needs to be narrower, but that would further separate cars from walking, make the walking experience nicer. If there is some way to incorporate, perhaps not down that central aisle, central meaning in the center of the parking lot, not the 12-foot, that could be an idea.
Okay. Is anybody against exploring that option? Okay. In the packet that we got, somewhere mentioned that there are 86 spaces currently, and then 2 other places at 77, so if we can just make sure that
Yeah,
is
it is in
accurate.
fact 77.
Okay.
So we're proposing 86.
Right,
So
so if
apologize
that
for
could be
that.
corrected for the final packet.
Sure.
Okay. I think that's all I have.
Your questions maybe wonder one other thing. For the walkway on the north side of the property, that's going to be concrete.
Correct.
And why choose concrete?
I think it would probably hold up the best. I mean, that's really the main reason.
So so right now, maybe this is not an issue, but right now, there's like a crushed limestone path. It's been there for a long time and amended and all the rest. If you were to put in a concrete path there, is there a chance that it would disturb any of the roots of the tree, of the bushes and stuff that's right on the other side of the fence on the private property?
I don't think that it would. I mean, we'll look specifically at the drip lines of each of those trees. I think we're far enough. I mean, we will look at it. We would be easily 10 feet from those trees. Some of them are a little bit larger, but we'll definitely take a look at that.
I think a lot of the ones that are right up against the fence are buckthorn, but I'm just wondering about that. But also, this is something of an artifact, which is living with something for a long time. Having that crushed limestone is kind of more, it's a softer look, and it's maybe, I don't know, more appealing, more child-friendly, whatever, to have crushed limestone as opposed to a long concrete
Sure.
thing that might crack in the future, get damaged, start looking, not so nice. So just aesthetically, I would comment on that. I don't think it makes any difference to permeability. And then the figures that you presented to us about permeability, when you were talking about the 0.64 acres, that's not including the field, right? Those are, you haven't presented any figures to us on the field's permeability at this point.
You are correct. It's only the permeable pavers, permeable playground engineered wood fiber, and the permeable concrete basketball court. That's what equals to the 0.66 acres.
This field, is this larger than what exists there now?
It's just a bit larger than
Just a smidge, yeah.
Just a tiny bit, okay. And then I had a question, Mr. Green, you said something about it would be like an 80 to 90% reduction in stormwater flow into the village sewers?
Peak flow. So
Okay.
that would be right now, water lands on the surface, it runs off quickly into the street. It doesn't even go into storm sewer, so it's sheet drains straight to the street. We're proposing to hold it probably for roughly 2 days, up to 2 days. It would hold the water, slowly releasing it, so you're getting that water released back into the system over 2 days instead of 20 minutes.
So how does that slow release work with this vault? I don't think you mentioned how large the vault is.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think you said then it would filter into the gravel beds underneath. How does that slow?
Yep. So I don't have the size of the vaults yet, and I'll be sure to mention that at the next meeting. I'll list it as I usually do, and I'll be very proud to brag how big it'll be. But it'll be sized quite a bit. It's sized for the 100-year storm, so that's a pretty significant event. So it'll be a very large vault that'll hold. We measure those things in acre feet, so it's an acre a foot deep. That's the size we're talking. So it'll be a substantial vault.
It's going to be one or multiple?
It might. We don't know yet. We might put it under the grass field. We could put it under the parking lot. We'll choose a different vault based on that. So we might use a plastic system underneath play area, but we might not want to use that under drive area where fire trucks are driving. So we might use concrete beneath parking, or we could use another system. We've got to look at the economics and the depths. So the deeper the system, the more likely we're going to use some sort of concrete vault rather than a plastic pipe system. So it's a little bit early, but yeah, it probably would be closer to the 90% than the 80%, I have a feeling.
Okay, all right. And those, I mean, it's not really our rule here, I guess, but maybe it is. Those have a long lifespan.
Yes.
A plastic vault has a long lifespan.
Yes. Not all systems do. Some have very short lifespans, 20 years. We don't use those systems. Those, I won't name any names, but
Okay.
there are systems that,
Okay.
that don't last as long.
Okay. And I think you said that you'd be putting in new, I don't know what they're called, sewer pipes on the school property, replacing many of those?
Yes, yeah, the majority actually within the project area. Maybe not elsewhere on on Woodside. We probably won't replace a lot of pipes over there. A lot of those have already been replaced a couple years ago. But within the parking area, we definitely don't want to put new parking on top of old pipes that have to get dug up in a few years. So it's short-sighted to do that kind of thing. So we're definitely improving, replacing those pipes now.
All right, thank you.
And, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Chairperson Mateo, if I might ask a couple of questions.
Please, yep.
Sure, I just wanted to clarify, on the conceptual site plan on the north side of the field, there are several, I think 6 rectangles kind of in between the trees.
Yeah, I think we're just showing benches there.
Great,
It's conceptual right now,
sure,
so we'd have to, really study what space is available for those.
sure. And would you mind speaking to the site lighting and changes that might be proposed?
Yeah, we're early on, obviously, with that. In our next submission, we include site photometrics. We will be including site lighting in the parking lot, for sure. Combination of that and some building lighting and some lighting around the new playground. But obviously, we would maintain the zero lot line, or zero light lot line, and, dark sky principles. So that'll be part of our next package.
And to be clear, this doesn't affect the special use. They don't have to, nothing's being expanded, so they don't need to renew the special use, right?
That's correct.
Commissioner Miller suggested narrowing the middle pedestrian walkway. Was it just the one?
Yeah, just the one that's 12 foot 6 inches.
Are there other commissioners that agree with that? Really wanted to have that considered? Substituting some green space?
I actually like the wider walkway, that area. I think it allows for easier flow. Kids are going to go back and forth.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, because that's the one that's the walkway that would link up with the crosswalk, correct?
Oh, I think you're thinking the crosswalk.
The crosswalk, okay, so the crosswalk's
No.
over there.
So it would actually be this one.
This is the one that,
Oh, okay. Yeah, then scratch it. I don't really.
but that's the walkway that you're going to encourage the kids to use.
Yes, yeah, that we're seeing as the main thoroughfare for bikes and pedestrians.
Right.
Yeah, I'd support it. I'd agree then. If that's going to be the one that either through active encouragement or some other form of encouragement for the kids to use that, I'm fine with it being broader, just because there's going to be, bikes and more kids, and, that makes sense.
Plus, I think if you've got games going on or you've got pedestrians looking at the field, you might have some standing traffic
Right,
in that walkway.
sure.
Other opinions? Okay. So I'm going to cross that one off, Commissioner Miller.
That's okay. I mean, the idea of spectators is a good one at field events.
So to recap, several commissioners would like the board and you to reconsider the 6-foot chain link fence along Aiken side. Maybe have a fence that's shorter or ornamental. Provide us with existing versus proposed green space. Consider moving the bump out on Woodside to a place that might be used more often. Perhaps in conversation with the traffic engineer and our police department. Some are in favor of the fence along that pedestrian walkway, others have not. Again, there could be further conversations about that. I'm agnostic. Some like the fence around the playground, others not so much. So again, that maybe could be talked about some more with their group. In the final packet, have some narrative about the planters, what they'll be made of, what they'll be for, plant list, correct number of current parking lots, consideration of merging the parking lot islands. I don't know if that might make things easier. Maybe you'll gain a space.
Okay.
And consider replacing the north fence.
I'm sorry, what was
The north fence right at the corner
Oh,
at Mr.
sure.
Sachi's
Yep.
lot. Commissioners, what did you think about the southernmost pedestrian walkway? The up-down one. Commissioner Miller was suggesting making that a green space that would add to green perimeter around the parking lot. Are there any opinions on that?
And my understanding, Planner Siren, is that if this was in the B1 or B2 district, that would have to be a buffer yard? Is that right, an interior?
That's correct.
Okay, but since it's in the R1, it doesn't have to be a green buffer.
I believe that's correct, but I'll need to double check that.
So,
I don't feel strongly, what you said about being agnostic about it all. But the reality is kids are going to, if you make it a green space, kids are going to walk in the green space, and it will be a muddy space and a not so green space before too long. So I don't have any real issues with having it as a walkway for people who are going that direction.
well, if you put plant material there, they're not going to walk through there. I just don't think they're going to be interested. And it's far away from the recreational area, and I think our supervising teachers would not allow kids to sneak all the way over there and play there. Now, it's possible if they're running to school, 1 or 2 could run through there, but I just think it would be nicer to have that as green space and also further the permeable surface.
It's not an existing walkway, is it?
No, it is not.
It's just paved. right,
If it was
paved
an
up to the
existing, I would
fence.
think kids would be more inclined, right? Because you're kind of used to
Continue your,
that, but it does seem kind of unnecessary, I guess.
My concern if we get rid of that is what the ultimate intention of, you said that there was an opening or an entrance for Central in that corner.
Correct.
I mean, would Central, I would be curious as if Central School would be using that to, maybe a primary grades or as a kindergarten entrance or something like that. I would be curious as to, and if that's the case, then maybe we would want that walkway because there would be kids using it to get to that entrance.
So I would tell
Maybe
you.
that's something you can explore?
Well, I will tell you that in talking with the district and the principal, that is an entrance that's used to go out to the now asphalt playground. So it would be the thoroughfare for them to go to the new playground. You know, and I can't speak to the sidewalk running to the east because it doesn't exist today. But the thought is that that would become more of a main thoroughfare into Central, both to the playground, pick up and drop off, as well as into the site potentially.
Don't
So
blind
that
us
was
with
sort of the
salt.
rationale.
Or maybe I should go up there, but I think.
How's the middle button?
This is in the center?
Yep.
Okay, so right now, this whole area here, this is all pavement here? And kids go in and out, and the central, there's an entrance here, door that kids go in and out in the morning. And so I'm proposing that this is not at all necessary, because kids are gonna go here, here, and then along this pathway over to the play area. So.
Well,
And if you think about where people are coming from, as they're walking down here, there's nowhere to come from, because this is that St. Peter and
Church,
Paul there. And then if people are over here, they're gonna walk towards the school here.
Yeah, there's a driveway
Here, there's,
It's a drive, yeah,
It's
it's
a
a driveway
driveway.
on the other side of the
right there.
church.
right, I'm saying where are people gonna come to use this path? And so the
Across the
road-
inside?
Yeah,
Yeah, but if they're coming over here, they're gonna come straight down this crosswalk and then come down here.
right, but I mean,
And
Central,
then they're gonna walk over here and over here.
But if you have if you have grades that are entering into that location, and if you have families that live across Akenside, they would use that pathway to get to that entry in
But there
Central.
are no families over Akenside here. I mean, there's a few houses, and there's a crosswalk across the street here, they're gonna come down here. Another thing, as far as safety goes, is I think if you have little kids and there are cars parked here, your whole reason for having a fence here was to keep kids away. I don't think you'd want kids walking on that pathway if there were cars there, if that was the rationale for having a 4-foot fence along the other walkway.
And right now, there is no proposed fence over there.
Yeah. And the neighbor might prefer, I don't know, if the neighbor would prefer their green space rather than a cement.
something to consider, so perhaps. I think I summarized everything. Planner Siren, what have I missed?
Yes, I was just unclear if there's consensus about the fence around the playground with the commission. I know that some were opposed and some were agnostic. I don't know if there's a consensus.
The fence around the play area?
The wood chip.
Around the
pink-
playground.
The pink
Yes.
area, it's
The
all
pink
wood chips.
4 foot tall.
Actually, is that really is that really a side yard? Is that really, I mean, are they restricted on the fencing in that area? Because it's kind of tucked into the building.
So in taking a look at this, let's see, that actually I think would be, I think they'd be fine at a 4-foot tall fence in that area.
Yeah.
Because it's the back of the building to 40 feet would be a 4-foot tall fence. So they could have a fence in that area, you know, I think by right, without
Okay.
measuring it.
Okay, I just wanted to, clarify that. It didn't seem like it needed a variance.
I don't think that
to
one
me.
would. I think
Oh,
that
okay.
they were putting one on the existing one, which they had talked about before.
Got it.
They would.
I'm agnostic with regard to that fence.
Okay.
What about the rest of you?
I can understand the purpose behind fencing in a playground. I think it's a safety issue. So I guess I'm leaning more towards fence as opposed to no fence.
Well, if we have no role, then I guess my opinion doesn't matter. But I think it looks to me like an extremely safe area, and you don't need yet another fence. I think Commissioner Matthews may or may not have been suggesting this idea when he talked about the walkway, about it's going to be a walkway. You don't want to overprotect kids necessarily and tell them this is the only place you can be and we're going to do this or that. But that's more of a pedagogical kind of child-raising perspective, not a zoning perspective.
no, I mean, that's a good point, because this is not like the scenario at the playground in Ames, right, which is right off a street. This is a playground tucked behind the school. Granted, there is parking there, but, yeah, if, you know, I mean, safety's paramount, I get that, and I would, you know, if that's what it is, it's what it is, but if we could explore not having a fence around a playground, I think would be a good thing.
Given where this is located internal to the site, I would strongly defer to whatever the school board would feel appropriate. I would not want to make this call on child safety for them.
Okay. I would also would defer to experts in school design and safety.
Great. Thank you.
Can I bring up one more thing?
Sure.
Is with regard to green space, are we, as a commission, willing to entertain the possibility of fewer parking spaces for more green space? I mean, I feel like the school should have a good handle on what their need is, so they should be providing what's needed as opposed to what the zoning ordinance, you know, what the letter of the zoning ordinance is.
I would agree with that, that if the school doesn't want all of the additional parking,
Right.
I'd rather see green space.
I'm in favor of more green space. And I actually had a question for DLA as to whether, when you were tasked with designing this, was you given a priority, like we want you to favor parking, we want you to favor green space, we want X number of parking spaces or more, or how did that work? How did you come up with this particular number of parking spaces?
We were looking to match the existing and provide more. We knew we were going to be, I mean, it was a very difficult puzzle. We knew we were going to be below what was required by ordinance. So we were trying to state a case that existing works today. We know the neighborhood has street parking, so we're trying to improve that existing condition and then provide some of the other amenities. So that it wasn't, I mean, our priority is student safety, recreation space, green space. Parking's a necessary, I don't want to call it evil, but it's a necessary thing. Pick up and drop off is part of that safety configuration too. So again, a lot of moving parts.
I think there's certainly many ways you could, if the district wanted to, they could add more green space. And I just, as a commissioner, I would be in favor of even reduced number of spaces, even further below what our code currently requires for more green space.
Commissioner Matthews?
Just one point to that. I mean, I'm almost in 100% agreement, except my concern would be this would be a question, I think, for the, you know, for the school board and the, you know, the architects and engineers who have the numbers. I'd be loath to push cars onto residential streets at the expense, you know, saying we want more green space in the school parking lot, but in order to get that green space, we're going to have people parked on Aiken side and on Woodside. I mean, and I always get those two confused. The front of the school is Woodside, and I mean, there are cars parked on Woodside almost all the way down to, you know, to 31st Street every morning. Maybe not quite, I'm exaggerating a bit, but pretty far. So I think we need to be aware of that this is the main parking lot, and we don't want to inconvenience the community, the neighborhood with cars on the street.
I mean, improve the existing situation, because it's been this way forever, where
Oh,
there
yeah.
has been parking, and, yeah, okay.
Commissioner Hennigan?
Since we are talking about increasing green space in the parking lot, I think it would be worth reexamining the benefit of that sidewalk through the middle of the parking lot. And I can see why it was included, but I'm not sure if that's the best use of that space, considering there are alternatives, and we do want to direct kids to use the large pedestrian walkway. Why encourage them to walk through the parking lot when we don't have to? And also, that could be an easy way to grab some additional square footage to make those islands bigger.
I actually kind of like that thought. If we don't have to have that center walkway, and there may be a reason for it, I don't know, but if we don't have to have that, then the kids will have to walk in the pedestrian walkway.
Yeah, I guess the thinking there in talking with the district and the school is that, you know, there is currently supervision back there to direct students, more necessary now than would be in a large parking lot like that, and it's not extremely large, but it's large enough that if you park your car in the middle of that parking lot, you're walking through the parking lot to get to either a pathway or the school. So to offer some immediate, direct, safe pathway is a good design principle, something we do when we can. Again, lots of challenges on this site, so.
I would also be okay if that crosswalk went away. But I think we're all in favor of more green space, but I would only have you consider it if it can be productive, something's going to grow, and it can be maintained properly.
Sure.
Because if not, then there's no point in doing that.
Well, I did have one question. So the buffer area that faces off the parking lot that faces Akenside, I believe that's supposed to be 10 feet wide, and is it intended? Yeah, that, is it, I think that's what the code requires, and is it 10 feet wide?
Yes,
It is? Okay.
Yes.
All right, I just wanted to check, it didn't look that wide. But- Oh, and one other question. I know right now, I think recently what they've started doing is with the driveways, they rope them off so that there's, cars cannot enter. I assume with the new plan, that would not be necessary.
It would not be
anymore.
necessary. That's not the intent to continue that.
Anything else? Mr. Sachi? Please. Need to record you for posterity.
So I appreciate your concern for expanding green space, but I would fully endorse what Commissioner Matthews said about pushing more cars out to Woodside. Right now, you're just, I mean, every year it gets worse as D96 adds more staff and they don't have any place to park in the lot. Right now, it's got to be about 10 or 12 homes as you proceed north on Woodside that have D96 cars parked in front of them all day long,
Right.
right?
But what you, so, never mind. It's probably not
So,
appropriate.
so if we have a visitor, they literally have nowhere to park. So I would appreciate any moves towards keeping as many parking spaces as possible on D96 property and not pushing them out onto a main street like Woodside. Or I'm sure Aiken, I don't know if any, I don't think anyone is here from Akenside tonight or if you had any feedback from them, but my guess is that they'd feel the same way. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to seeing you again. And I won't speak for the commission, but I appreciate the desire to have permeable surfaces in the lots and the hardscape. So that's right up our alley. Thanks.
We know. Thank you.
All right. We have no old business. Our next meeting is February 22nd. Are we having one for sure, or are we?
We don't have any items for the agenda currently, and I will let the commissioners know as soon as possible if we would need to cancel that meeting.
Okay. Thank you. So is there a motion to adjourn? Were you going to say something?
That I can't be here on February 22nd,
Okay.
for the record.
And I also will not be able to be here at that meeting.
Goodness. On the off chance that we don't have a meeting, because that would be my last one as a commissioner,
Oh, boy.
I want to thank everybody. You've done really terrific work, and I've enjoyed working with you and with Sonia and Ashley. So thanks for a fun run,
Thank you.
Well, thank you for leading us.
an educational run.
Thanks very well.
Okay, so is there a motion to adjourn? I was just going to say, come back. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.